Joining us now for analysis on this issue, specifically when it comes to the U.S. presence in the Middle East, is Lisa Daftari, an expert in the field and the founder of the Foreign Desk News. Excuse me, Lisa. It's a real pleasure having you on the program tonight, and it's especially important because there's a lot of moving parts in the Middle East right now, and possibly an exchange of power as regarding that issue as well. So I want to start with President Trump. When it comes to his decision to remove troops from the Middle East, is that significant?
Oh, it's quite significant. Look how important this is to the president to minimize our presence, our military resources in the region, and to want to do that in the last hours, perhaps, of his presidency. This if this is going to go through, it'll be in mid-January, which just puts it a week before the potential inauguration of Biden. It's significant for many reasons. It was believed that this is a pro-war president, that just like they accuse all the conservatives of being pro-war, and here you have someone who is courageous enough to diminish our presence in the Middle East just because we didn't need to be there. All we were doing is, delivering bad news to parents sending their young children to fight overseas. So I think it's quite important. It's receiving backlash on both sides because people believe that it will lead to more violence in the region. But look, we've had our seat at the table. We haven't been able to help any of these places go any further, whether it's Syria, Iraq, or Afghanistan. And really, the bad is outweighing the good at this point.
And I mean, we've been in Afghanistan for almost 20 years now. It's the longest running war in U.S. history, and I don't know if we have much to show for it. I mean, I know that, for example, in Iraq, Saddam Hussein's out of there and all that, but when it comes to Afghanistan, I don't know if even the people who are there at this moment know their mission on the ground because it's ever changing. But I want to shift to Iran for a brief moment because reports earlier this week said that President Trump decided against a strike on Iran. That was something that he decided against. We know that Israel took some actions against Iranian forces in Syria last night, but a lot of people are saying that a Biden administration could be a return back to the way that we treated Iran beforehand. Do you suspect that would be the case?
Oh, the only thing we have to show for a Biden policy vis-a-vis Iran is the Obama years when Biden was vice president, because we have not seen any sort of plan by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden regarding what they would do with Iran. Now, let's assume that they do go back to an Obama era foreign policy regarding Iran. Would it mean appeasement with the mullahs of Iran rather than engagement with the people of Iran, which is what President Trump has attempted to do? The course that we're taking right now has proven to be the correct course in dealing with the Iranian regime, to apply pressure, to apply sanctions that are targeted, and to the best of their ability, avoid hurting the Iranian people and are targeted more towards sectors that affect the Iranian regime. The people of Iran are telling us this, that they prefer the pressure on their government, rather than to have this appeasement or a very fake piece of paper, and a nuclear deal that means nothing. It has meant nothing to the lives of the everyday Iranian people.
And I think it's worth pointing out, too, that the reason why President Trump was mulling a strike against Iran is because they were ramping up their nuclear program in violation of that 2015 accord, at least according to the United Nations, who did a report based off of that. And so we know that the president did not follow through on that strike, obviously, since, it never happened. But there are questions now, too. I mean, you bring up the people of Iran, and I think it's a very important point to bring up that there is an organic movement happening there absent any U.S. pressure. I mean, we see them going to the streets. We see them speaking out against their government more so than they have in the past. But if we were to take troops out of the Middle East, hypothetically just all of them, would that change anything necessarily, or would we still have a presence in another way?
It's so interesting that you bring that up because it circles back to your initial point that the future of the Middle East is in the hands of the people of the Middle East in each place, whether it's Iran or Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and all the places where we're seeing turmoil. And the best indicator of that is to look at the Abraham Accords, the peace deal, or I should say economic deal, that incentivized peace across the region between Israel and and modern Arab nations. And why do I bring that up? Because that just shows us that the people of the Middle East, the Arabs of these countries, have decided that we want to take the future into our own hands. We want to create a better environment where we can have a trade partner in Israel, a tourism partner in Israel. We can exchange apps and maybe a COVID vaccine with Israel. That just shows where the region is headed. The young people of the region want a better future. They don't want to be stuck into the algorithms of the past that hasn't worked for them. And what President Trump is doing is removing us from that equation that just has not worked. The way that we will be involved is if a potential Biden administration or anyone else who comes in the next decade or so follows what President Trump has done, and that is to empower the people of the Middle East, to incentivize trade, peace deals, and everything else, and to put it into their own hands to create a future for themselves.
And Lisa, before I let you go too, you bring up a really interesting point. Is it better to deal with Iran, for example, by dealing with our allies around Iran, or perhaps people that were formerly adversaries and now are willing to come to the table? Is that how we should be handling foreign policy as compared to going directly to Iran and meeting their demands?
Look, with foreign policy, there is no one size fits all solution, and I think that that has been the mistake of previous White House administrations. The key with Iran, specifically, because you asked, is to deal with the biggest Achilles heel facing Iran, and that is not its neighbors and it's not the United States, but it's its own people. 80 plus million people who will come to the streets, who are willing to sacrifice their lives, their livelihood, and everything else to have a better future. They're asking for regime change. They're asking for the toppling of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and they have spoken. What we need to do is, again, empower them, make their voices heard, and allow them to do what's best for their future.
I think that's very well said, because even over the past 10 years, we have seen those organic type of movements breaking out throughout the Middle East. I don't think it's too crazy to assume that the same thing could happen with the people of Iran. They're a hardworking, smart people who have been preparing for this moment for decades. And I think that we are reaching that point where we might see some action in the near future. But Lisa Daftari, it's a real pleasure having you on the program tonight, breaking down what's happening in the Middle East. Thank you.
My pleasure.